Hello everyone. Today's case is not only a Canadian one, but it's also a missing and murdered Indigenous case as well, which are cases that I definitely think need to be talked about more, and they're not talked about enough, and that is why we are doing this case today. As I've covered in other cases before, which I definitely recommend you watching those cases as well, there are one too many cases of missing and murdered Indigenous men, women, and children in our country. And today's case of a missing mother whose case was not only mishandled over and over again until she turned up dead, but it was also dismissed right off the bat as someone who wasn't worth looking for. And it's ridiculous. There was excuse after excuse. There are going to be things in this case that really piss you off, and just choices that the law enforcement made in this case that just make you really shake your head. So today we're going to be talking about Amber Tuccaro, whose murder to this day is still not solved, and in my opinion, maybe possibly linked to a serial killer who has never been identified and never been caught to this very day, which is absolutely terrifying. 20-year-old Amber Alyssa Tuccaro was of Mikisew Cree First Nations, living in Fort McMurray with her mother. She was born on January 3rd of 1990 near Alberta to Vivian and Andrew Tuccaro and had 4 older brothers. She was described as the apple of her mother's eye, a bright light to her family. She's vibrant and had big dreams, never failing to make those around her laugh. And she would eventually become a mother herself to her 14-month-old son, Jacob, who she was very dedicated to and would often sing Johnny Cash to. Amber's dream was to give Jacob an amazing life and to find a home to call their own. However, housing is extremely expensive in Canada, as we all know. So Amber frequently stayed at a place called Unity House, which was a local resource provided to the community. And this is also the place that she would meet the woman who would last see her alive. On August 17th of 2010, this unnamed woman from Unity House ended up stopping by Amber's family home and ended up inviting her and Jacob on a vacation down to Edmonton for the weekend. Amber, thinking this would be a fun change of scenery, ended up saying yes. However, her mother Vivian was wary about the last minute plans.
And she's like, Mom, it's okay, just 2 sleeps and I'll be back. And well, even though I tell Amber not to go or do whatever, she's gonna do it anyways. And so they left that evening.
But just hours later, Amber, Jacob, and the unnamed female friend would end up flying the 467 kilometers from Fort McMurray in northern Alberta to Alberta's capital of Edmonton. The plan was to stay the night at the Nixu Place Motel near the Edmonton International Airport in Nixu, a small industrial business park south of Edmonton, and this was because it was cheaper and it would help them save some money overall in the trip. However, according to this unknown female friend's story, the next day on August 18th, she would last see Amber around 7:30 or 8:30 p.m. And she says that that night, Amber ended up leaving the motel for reasons that are honestly not exactly clear. I've seen in some stories she had decided to go out to go buy some food, but then in other stories I've seen, it went that she was too excited to wait to go to downtown Edmonton, so she decided to hitchhike that night to downtown Edmonton, which honestly, in my opinion, I don't know which story even remotely sounds true to me. It's just really odd to me that she would leave her son with this unnamed woman when she seemed to be very protective of Jacob and then just decide to go to downtown Edmonton to do what, party? But she also didn't seem like a partier. So right off the bat, the story is honestly really strange, but we do know for a fact that she did start hitchhiking, which apparently is something she'd done before, and her mother had warned her to like make a phone call or something to someone while she was riding in the car so that she would be safe. So as I said, we do know for a fact that for whatever reason, Amber left the motel, left Jacob with this unnamed friend, and then decided to hitchhike. And we also know for a fact that a man would eventually stop, offer Amber a ride, and she would accept it. Now, this man has never been identified to the public, although it does seem like law enforcement may know who he is. The description of the vehicle that Amber got into that night is also never been made to the public, so there's really not much information, unfortunately, in this case. And I think we do see this a lot in the Canadian cases. The Canadian law enforcement seems to be a lot more tight-lipped than the American law enforcement. But in my opinion, in cases like these, I think it hurts the investigation. But that's just my opinion. So we don't know who this man is. We don't know what this vehicle is. But what we do know is that Amber would never return back to the motel after that. And when Amber wasn't back in the morning, that unnamed female friend would end up calling Amber's mother, Vivian, and letting her know that Amber never came home, and Vivian would end up calling the police. And as we so often see in these Canadian cases that involve our First Nations people, it didn't seem like the RCMP, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, it didn't seem at all like they took Amber's disappearance seriously. And as we will find out, their investigation was awful and ridiculous to say the least. To start, when Vivian attempted to report Amber missing, police initially told her that Amber was probably out partying somewhere in downtown Edmonton and to wait 24 hours, which we, 1, know is not necessary, and 2, the first 48 hours are the most important when someone goes missing. But we hear this from police over and over again, which in my opinion is ridiculous. According to Amber's mother, the police told her, and I quote, well, maybe Amber's out partying and she will call or whatever, end quote. But Vivian swore that Amber would not leave her son anywhere. And it wouldn't be until a month after Amber's disappearance that police would finally start investigating. On September 4th of 2010, a press release would come out where the RCMP said that they did not think that Amber was in any danger. And on top of that, after taking forever to even take this investigation seriously to put Amber on the missing persons list, the RCMP would take her off the missing persons list based on an unconfirmed sighting. And when the family would end up asking the police if they had seen Amber, if they had put their own eyes on Amber, they said no. So after a whole bunch of bullshit, she was eventually finally put back on the list on September 23rd of 2010. But no apology would be made to the family at that point in time. Then to make matters even worse, a suitcase of Amber's belongings that was actually taken from that motel that they were staying at before she went missing was accidentally destroyed. The report reading that a constable and corporal with the Leduc RCMP detachment, whose names were redacted, and I quote, failed to properly follow policy or reasonable investigative practices for securing seized property, end quote. In my opinion, that's more than just an oopsie. And it's insane when you really compile everything that the police did wrong in this investigation. I don't even know how they're a police force. I'm gonna be honest, I am all for supporting law enforcement, and you would know if you watch my videos consistently that I'm usually very lenient with law enforcement, and I always say, like, this could have happened, that could have happened. I have said before, I know people who are in law enforcement in Canada specifically, but I also won't let that overshadow when there is bullshit, and I am not afraid to say when I think there's something messed up happening. And in this case, it was just one thing after another, and it really pissed me off reading it that Amber had no chance, in my opinion. She had no chance of ever being found, or at least being found alive, because the police just didn't seem to care, and when they did do things to actually do their job, they ended up doing things like destroying evidence. And when you really wonder why some cases don't get solved, things like this are the answer, in my opinion. And it's so sad that it was just one thing after another in Amber's case. To make matters worse, it would be about 4 months before any interviews actually started to be performed by the police. On top of that, police actually never interviewed that woman, that female friend from the shelter that Amber flew to Edmonton with and was staying there and was the last person to see her alive. And really, the only story we're really going off of from that night is this woman's. And they never interviewed this woman. She was basically just written off right away and was not considered a person of interest, which is wild to me because usually the people closest to the person that goes missing and the last person to see them alive are usually the people that are interviewed the heaviest. But in my opinion, the police just did not even bother to do any investigatory work in this. They literally did the bare minimum, and then even the bare minimum, they fucked up on that. And I'm not saying that this woman had anything to do with Amber's disappearance. I mean, there are, in my opinion, I think that you could still look into her in some way, some form. I honestly think you could still question if she had anything to do with it, if I'm going to be honest. But there is evidence to show that Amber was alive after leaving the motel, which we will talk about in a moment. What we do know is that Amber was alive after leaving that motel room, and we know that because after years passed, with Amber's family wondering what happened to her and missing her, wondering where she was out there, wondering if she was still alive, the family now taking in her young son and him growing up not knowing where his mother was and what happened to her either. It would be 2 years after Amber's disappearance that the RCMP would finally release 61 seconds of a recorded phone call that Amber had while in that vehicle that picked her up while she was hitchhiking. And in the background of this phone call, you can hear a male driver. The original recording is said to be 17 minutes long, so this is only a 61-second clip, which really reminds me of the Delphi case and what they did in that case where there is a longer version of the video and they only showed a tiny snippet of it. And just like in the Delphi case, they released this recording hoping that it would help identify the man in it. In this phone call, you can hear Amber telling the driver, and I quote, "You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go," end quote. And then you can hear the driver assuring her that they are heading east on a back road towards Edmonton. However, police believe that the man was lying and actually was driving her south into rural Leduc County. So I'm going to play that recording for you now.
Where are we by?
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north of Beaumont. Yo, where are we going?
Just
No, this is a... Are you fucking kidding me? You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we?
We're going.
No, we're not.
Yes.
Then where the fuck are these roads going to?
50th Street.
50th Street. Are you sure east, right? Over now.
Now, releasing this recording actually brought in new tips because a number of women would end up coming forward claiming that they could recognize the voice in that phone call. And it would turn out that they all named the same man, which you think would be an amazing break in the case. However, the RCMP allegedly looked into this man and he was ruled out despite people calling till this very day saying that they recognized this man in that recording. And this man would have been the last person to have seen Amber alive and was the one to pick her up hitchhiking and drive her to an area where she would later be found dead. Because just 4 days after that phone call was released, on September 1st of 2012, horseback riders would end up finding Amber's partial skeletal remains in a rural farmer's field, and is also the exact area where it's assumed that this driver was driving Amber in the wrong direction. Interestingly enough, in fact, the length of the phone call is said to actually replicate the amount of time it would have taken the driver to drive from the area of the motel to where her body would later be found, that 17-minute time span. It would also eventually come out that that person that Amber was on the phone with and who had called her while she was in the vehicle with that stranger was actually her brother, who was being held in the Edmonton Remand Center at the time. And they were thankfully recording outbound phone calls from inmates at that time, or else we probably would never have this phone call. We would never know that Amber had made a phone call. We would honestly not know anything at all then. But by some stroke of luck, Amber made a phone call, or a phone call came into her from her brother, and that call was recorded. If it had just been a normal phone call, which if she had just like called her mother or something, we would not probably have it. Even though it seems like it's at this point not really helping at all, because allegedly the man that was driving her has been ruled out. Now, again, years and years would pass, and it honestly seemed like this case was never going to be solved, that there was never going to be justice for Amber. In 2014, Amber's mother, Vivian, would end up filing a complaint against the RCMP for mishandling Amber's case. The RCMP wouldn't comment at that time, but did say that their policies and procedures have changed due to what happened in Amber's case. I wonder why. And also, why weren't these policies and procedures in place to start with? Because everything that they did was just ridiculous, in my opinion. Like, what police force would do what they did? Doesn't make sense to me. Not considering someone missing, even though people are trying to report them missing, taking them off a missing persons list, even though they are still actually missing, destroying evidence, just minor things, you know? I'm telling y'all, the Canadian police force really boils my blood sometimes. Just the number of cases I've covered from Canada where the police just do the most ridiculous things. Like, I still can't get over, like, even some of the most prolific serial killer cases, they have screwed up so badly that it's just shocking that anything ever gets done here. I'm gonna be honest, like, anyone ever gets caught, that there's ever justice here. Like, people think the American police system's bad. The Canadian cases, they shake me to my core. They really keep me up at night, because honestly, just look at some of our biggest cases, like the Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolko case. In my opinion, they fucked up really majorly on that one. Honestly, look at the Bruce MacArthur case from Toronto as well, which I have also covered on my channel. The amount of times that he literally walked himself into the police station and the police were like, "Nah, you're a great guy. Go on with your day." And this man was literally murdering people. It's ridiculous. It's insane. It's honestly, in my opinion, not just the Indigenous that are experiencing the Canadian police force just mishandling things. It's just in general, I think. And as I say that, I still believe that there are amazing police officers out there that have the best intentions and actually do want to properly investigate and solve cases and get justice for people. And I do believe that there are police forces out there that do amazing work. But there's just a lot of them that make the rest of them look bad, in my opinion. And the cases they just pile up. The amount that I have done on my channel, it hurts my heart that there are this many families out there that have had to deal with this. It's just like some of them only have 2 brain cells that are trying to bounce off each other and they're just not connecting. Like, I just don't understand how you destroy evidence. I just don't know why you take some off a missing persons list. And what makes it worse is that this is in 2010 to now. It's not like this is something that happened in the 70s or the 80s. Like, this is now still. In 2017, the Tuccaro family ended up increasing the reward to $5,000 and also started a social media campaign called Justice for Amber, which I will have that all linked down below if y'all want to follow along with them and support the family. 2015 would mark another tragedy as Amber's father, Andrew, sadly ended up passing away without knowing what happened to his daughter, leaving Vivian to raise Jacob alone and to fight for justice for Amber alone now. Deputy Commissioner Curtis DeBlocki would end up apologizing to the family 11 months after the report was released and said the RCMP's investigation was, and I quote, "not our best work," end quote. I'm not going to repeat what I just said, but y'all know how I'm feeling about that. And I think the Tuccaro family feels the same way because they also ended up rejecting his apology. In September of 2019, the Tuccaro family would end up filing paperwork to exhume Amber's remains because they wanted to do some DNA testing of their own because at this point, they were unsure if the skull that the law enforcement found was actually Amber's. And this honestly all stems from their distrust with the RCMP after everything that they did to screw up this investigation. Her brother Paul also explained that he has doubts given how fast the identification occurred. He also noted that there was actually discrepancies between Amber's dental records and dental fillings that were present in the skull. And their hopes were to compare Jacob's DNA with the skull and then either confirm or deny if it was Amber's. Now, I didn't see an answer if they ended up going through with this and if it was or not, but let me know down below if you did, or if I do end up finding it somewhere after I'm done filming this, I'll leave a little note in the comment section. Now, January 24th of 2020, another turn of events came with a statement that read, and I quote, "Today, the RCMP made public that they had received a tip on Amber Tuccaro's homicide profile. In early December 2019, the Banff RCMP was contacted by a male who alleged that his father may be responsible for a missing person from the Banff area. The male also stated that he believes that his father may be linked to numerous missing persons and homicide files in Alberta. On January 20th of 2020, the male advised the RCMP that he believes his father to also be involved in the disappearance and murder of Amber Tuccaro.
But there are some distinct speech patterns my father uses."
Distinct speech patterns, a U.S. man says he and his family hear in the last known recording of Amber Tuccaro and her suspected killer.
Where are we by?
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
Now, I've also never seen any other information on that as well. However, I did see somewhere that apparently this man had made claims before about his father or just false statements in general before. So I'm not too sure what came of that. Now, at this point in time, Amber's mother Vivian was quoted saying, and I quote, "I am 56 years old now and raising a little boy that is so full of energy. He drives me crazy, but at the same time, he's my sanity. I mean, he's all I have left to my baby. Just the way he looks at me sometimes, the way he stands like his mommy, the way he says words, the way he says them the way Amber used to. Like Amber had a witty attitude, and that's what Jacob has." End quote. As of March 16th of this year, Amber's family is still trying to find answers for her. The family also held a press conference to remind everyone just of that. And as I mentioned, they also have a social media campaign that they've been pushing out as well. The last I seen, Amber's case is now being taken care of by a unit called CARE, which investigates unsolved homicides and cases of vulnerable missing people. However, this is where things get interesting and turn towards my theory of a possible serial killer. It turns out that CBC's Aboriginal unit has found at least 15 unsolved cases of Indigenous women who have vanished and then turned up murdered in and around the Edmonton area. And the potential remains of 4 of these women, including Amber, were all found within a few kilometers of each other in Leduc County. And these women are Edna Bernard, who went missing on September 22nd of 2002, Katie Sylvia Ballantyne, who went missing on April 28th of 2003, Dolores Brower, who went missing on May 15th of 2004, and Corey Ottenbright, who went missing on May 9th of 2004. All 4 of these women were also hitchhiking at the time of their disappearance. To this day, police have never released Amber's cause of death or any results from her autopsy, but it's assumed she died via homicide. As I've said, they've also never released the name of the woman she was with. They've also never released any information on the vehicle Amber got into. They've never released the information of the suspected driver, which is honestly, in my opinion, crazy, which is something in the US they would have released like as soon as they got it. But everything is just so quiet here in Canada. And honestly, I understand if the person's innocent. And I really do wonder if we had this information and the information of these other women and how they died and how they were found, if it would all link up. So what the hell is going on here? With the limited information we have on the cause of deaths and the individuals that were involved, it's honestly really hard to say. But the obvious theory is that the man that ended up picking Amber up when she was hitchhiking is the one that murdered her. And the fact that multiple other women were also hitchhiking in that area and then were also found dead in fields there, it leads me to wonder, is there a serial killer in that area? It's just too coincidental in my opinion. It also makes me wonder if these women are going missing, are they being murdered right away or are they being kept somewhere? Because it seems that if the family members or if police go and search that area, they're not finding them right away. It seems like they're finding these people like a long time after they go missing. And you'd think if they're being found in these farmers' fields and stuff, that these farmers are going to be using their fields in the summer and they would find these women's bodies right away, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. And I mean, we don't know any of the autopsies, so maybe there is evidence that they're being kept for a longer amount of time or that they're being tortured or something, that there may be some really twisted person out there that are taking these women. It's just too coincidental to me that there's all of these women that fit the same profile and they're all turning up dead. I also question the validity of the statements of this female friend that took Amber to Edmonton. It's just so weird to me that so last second she went over to Amber's house and asked her to go to Edmonton with her. But then again, we do know for a fact that Amber did leave the motel. It's not like she went missing from the motel. That there is a phone recording that she was in a strange man's vehicle and she seemed upset in this phone call. She seemed concerned and that some man was driving her somewhere. It made me question, like, maybe there's some conspiracy where this unnamed female friend set this up. But then again, it just seems too complicated then. It's usually the simpler answer. And then also, what would be the motive of that? So I honestly don't think it's that. I definitely thought about it for a moment, but in my opinion, it's definitely this driver that did something to her. But what I do really want to know is how police have ruled this driver out, because they have even said, I'm pretty sure that they have said that it has to be this driver. But then also there's all these people calling in saying that it's this specific person, and the police are saying that this person's ruled out. So are the police saying that they don't think that this man is the driver? But then why is there so many women from that area saying that they know for sure it's this man? Is it the police just screwing up again after they screwed up 600 other times in this case? Is there some cover up going on? Or is it genuinely not this person and all of these people are wrong in mixing up this person's voice? Or maybe it is this person that these women are identifying, but the police honestly don't have a way of linking him to anything. I really wonder if he has some kind of alibi. Like, again, we don't know any information because the police don't release anything. But what I do know is that I really, really do feel for Amber's family, especially her son. At this point, he's a teenager. He's old enough to know what's going on. This case is just so awful. And to think that police wouldn't look for Amber, it's so ridiculous. She was only 20 years old. She was a young mother. She was still so young. Yes, she was an adult technically, but 20 is so young. And the fact that she just wanted to go to Edmonton to go on a fun little vacation, because I'm sure she didn't go out much. I'm sure she hadn't traveled much. And, you know, she had a young son and she was trying to better her life for him. And she probably thought it was just going to be really exciting and something different finally. And she'd want to show her son, you know, traveling and what that was like, because he was getting a bit older to like, and old enough to understand what was going on. And it's just sad to think that for whatever reason, she decided to leave the motel that night. And honestly, whatever happened to her, she did not deserve it. But I do really wish we knew what happened to her. I really wish we had more information so that hopefully this killer could be caught, because I really do think releasing more information would help in this case, especially after all this time. But it does also then make me wonder if police are not releasing information because there may be a serial killer out there and they don't want to release stuff because they want to be able to nab him on knowing something that's not released. At this point, it's one of those things, like, it's been so long. Like, let's just get answers for this family. But what I do want to know is how you all feel about this case. Do you have any theories? Do you have any other information that I couldn't find? I also really encourage you all to share this video, share any content on Amber, because as I said, these cases don't get enough coverage. And honestly, this video is probably not going to get that many views because unfortunately, small cases like this, in cases of, you know, certain demographics, don't get as many views. And it's really sad and it's really tragic because they deserve just as many views as any other case. But maybe Amber's case can be the start of a change. So as I said, like this video up, share it. Again, share any other content. It doesn't have to be my video specifically. Just share any content about Amber that's out there, and hopefully someone out there will notice something. If they hear the story and hear that recording, they might hear that voice and be able to recognize it as someone else that maybe hasn't been named yet. Maybe someone has information on one of these other women that was found murdered as well that may lead to, you know, if there is a serial killer, being caught. But I think the best thing we can do is to do word of mouth and share the story and share this case, and eventually maybe it can be solved and we can get justice for Amber and her family. At the end of the day, let's all keep Amber's family in our thoughts, because it's been way too long once again, and they have suffered a definite injustice in the investigation of this case. As always, if there are any other cases that you guys want me to cover, this actually was a viewer recommended case to cover, I will look into it. So let me know in the comment section below and I will do my best. And even if it's a small case, I can pile a few together and I can create a video with a bunch of smaller cases as well. But I do want to continue to cover smaller cases, not just big sensational cases, because I do think they deserve to be talked about even a little bit more than the bigger cases. But yeah, let's have a big discussion below. And as always, I hope you all stay safe out there, lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.